Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Qala rabbi shrahli sadri wa yassirli amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Peace and blessings be upon you all. O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and have made you into nations and tribes, that you may know one another. Indeed, the most honored of you in the sight of your Creator is the most righteous indeed. He is knowing and acquainted. Assalamu alaikum, my listeners. You're here on Ramadan Special, EAVA FM on 102.5. My name is Sister Amreen. I'm your host today, and today's topic is cohesion in turbulent times. And I have some amazing guests in the studio today. So, Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Alhamdulillah. How is everyone's Ramadan going?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. We're gone past halfway. We're on Rosa 18 now, is it?
It's said we are using it.
Yes, subhanallah. So, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for all joining you today. So, I'd just like to reiterate, the guests today have their own opinions and their own views. And myself, I'm your host today. And inshallah, hopefully you'll be able to join us in the studio and give us your interactions. And we want to hear from you, the audience, especially of day of today and why we're here. So, like I said, the studio number is 212-9324 and the text number is 07450925084. So, before I go to questioning and interviewing my guests, I'm going to firstly introduce them. So, we have Brother Shaukat Adam Patel, who's a local resident optometrist and running down optical practices. He volunteers and is part of the Shura of Darul Arqam Educational Trust. He's a volunteer and chair of the Leicester MEND, which is Muslim Engagement and Development Working Group, and currently sits on the National Advisory Panel, also a volunteer. Next, I have Sister Seema Qureshi, who's fortunate as retires as a chaplain in the prison service in the London Hospital, chaplain in the drug and alcohol unit in Surrey Hospital, worked closely with the Surrey Police, worked as part of the G4S, Bernarders and the UK Borders. She's has managed people in crisis. She was fortunate to run a youth working group in Surrey, and also she has been running a group for 50 plus ladies in the masjid, and she used to invite people off the street and sit and make to feel and ask questions about Muslims and Islam. Alhamdulillah. She has also traveled to war-torn countries like Kosovo and Afghanistan. She spent many years doing dawah and learning from the best imams like Imam Siraj Wahab, Hamza Yusuf and Bilal Phillips. She has watched them in person at Hyde Park in Speaker's Corner. She says she learns a lot from her children. She's also studied, one of her sons actually has studied in Syria and Yemen. She has an amazing supportive husband, and in the last 7 years, she has supporting local schools in shelter and older vulnerable people, and supporting poor patients of troubled youth and in Pakistan. She's just returned to Leicester, and she's moved here only since the beginning of the year. And alhamdulillah, she says she's a student for life. So alhamdulillah. Next, I have my sister called Farah Guri, who is 27. She's a consultant on a career break at the moment and a volunteer member for the first Open Iftars in Leicester. She grew up in the Clarendon Park area, and she has only recently returned home after 8 years away, studying and working. She has, in that time, she's reached her English literature at the University of Cambridge and moved to London to start her new career. She enjoys trampolining, eating one too many Baker Street macarons, and pretending she can do yoga. So jazakallah khair for that. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so let's get into why we're here today. So my first question to you then is, why is it that we find in the Muslim community, why is it that we're perceived in such a bad light? I'm going to go to you, Brother Shaukat, first.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Assalamu alaikum to everybody in the studio as well. So alhamdulillah, so that's a quite interesting question, Sister Amreen. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time in the world to go through it. But there's a lot of factors.
Yes.
As a community, we have to hold our own hands up as well, and we have to look at ourselves.
Yes.
And first thing, I'll speak about that. There's a lot of, I wouldn't say, maybe ignorance is the right word to use, within our own community, not acknowledging what the Muslims and the Muslim community per se have done for the Ummah, or for the whole of humanity. So we always hear, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of shows, especially in Ramadan, where people talk about the contributions that the Muslims made to the war. Yet we were never taught, even as a Muslim myself, growing up, I had no idea.
I don't ever remember that until it came out recently.
Absolutely. 800,000 soldiers from the subcontinent fought in World War I, and 2 million fought in World War II.
Yes.
And yet, when we see blockbuster films, we're completely whitewashed. There's no mention of the Muslim contribution. And if you go even a bit further back, you talk about mathematics, algebra, the numbers, the calculations, the first people to invent the windmill, first people to do astronomy to understand that the moon rotates around the earth and the earth rotates around the sun was, alhamdulillah, the Arabs and the Muslim community back then. The first, in my profession, I'm an optician, the first person to discuss light and the fact that it goes through a hole in the way a pinhole camera works was a Muslim.
Yes.
I didn't know that. And I went to university, I didn't know that. I was never taught that. So it's two ways. There's so much ignorance on our part, therefore there's so much ignorance in the community. So they don't know what the Muslim community has contributed to the wider society. So that's just one factor. The second factor is, unfortunately, we live in a time where there's 1.6 billion of us. And when you have 1.6 billion of anybody, you are going to get an element that is going to create a little bit of trouble.
Yes.
So if you have 1.6 billion, even a 0.01% of that population, but unfortunately everybody gets tarnished with the same brush.
Yes.
When you have a media or certain element of the media who persistently and consistently portrays Muslims in a negative light, and I'm sure you're well aware of it as my fellow guests, and I've spoken on this station before about the study done by Cambridge University, where in 2012, Lancaster University, but published by Cambridge Press, was that for all the major red tops and major international newspapers, for every one neutral mention of a Muslim, not even a positive, so a neutral mention of a Muslim, in the newspaper is counterbalanced by 21 negative stories. So if I've never met Sister Amreen before, and I'd like to think myself I'm quite balanced, like to give everybody a fair chance, and I heard 21 negative things about you, and one thing that you live in Leicester as a neutral factor, I would come in with a preconception of what you're going to be like, and you're going to have to try very hard to convince me otherwise. So that's a brief summary of possibly why the Muslim community faced the situation that we are in. Obviously, there's a lot more elements to it as well.
Yeah. I'd like to come to you, Auntie Seema, is because you have such an array of experience, mashallah. So in your experience, because you've done you've actually actively gone out to change perceptions of people's attitudes and actually help the ummah in your way. So, excuse me, I want to ask you, in terms of your experience, how have you found how people have been receiving of you, being a Muslim woman, in your wisdom? What have you found yourself in your experience?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
It's a excellent question. Only experience, not the books, not hearsay. Only the personal experience actually shows you the reality about what's going on.
Yes.
And I think before 9/11, I was asleep. I never felt all this, to be honest.
Yes.
But after 9/11, it really hits everybody. And you had to fight a bit more to be British and Muslim. And I think of myself as British Muslim, and this is my country. They are my people here.
Yes.
Whether you are Muslim or not, But they don't accept you like that after 9/11. And in my experience, in my jobs also, I faced a lot of aggression. I faced a lot of racism.
Yes.
And it all boiled down to that you are a terrorist, basically, because, our dress as a Muslim woman also gives it away that we are Muslims. So I had to reflect on how I'm going to deal with all this.
Yes.
And alhamdulillah, when I studied the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu and I saw his conflicts and his tribulations and his persecution and how he dealt, I learned a lot.
Yes.
I remembered that I have to take the person as he is, not what he's doing at this minute, because that action does not represent him. So alhamdulillah, like for one story, if I come across, so the prison.
Yes.
There was one prisoner, I'm not going to mention names here. There was one prisoner, and she was very much against me, and she was the leader of the pack in the prisons.
Okay.
So every time I said, good morning, how are you, and all that, she will say, F.
Oh, subhanallah.
So this carried on for 2 years.
Wow.
Sister, do you mind me asking, were you wearing in this?
You wear hijab?
Yeah, hijab. Yeah.
When I started this job as a chaplain, I was in proper Muslim dress. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
And then one day she was in trouble, so I said to her, "Can I help you?" And she just jumped on me and she said, "Sit here and don't you understand? I hate you and all this. Why don't you understand? Why are you always nice to me? I can't stand you." So I said, "Why can't you stand me?"
Yeah.
So she says, "Because you're a ruddy terrorist. You're Muslim, you know." So in the conversation, I remembered the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So I stayed calm, gave her a bottle of water and drink myself. And I said, "To be honest, what do you know about Islam?"
Yes.
And she said, "Nothing." I said, "What do you know about Muslims?"
Wow.
And she said, "Nothing." So I said, "All right, if you don't know anything about me, how do you expect me to hate you?"
Yes.
Because my faith actually teaches if you hate someone, you're harming yourself more
Yes.
than that other person.
Subhanallah.
So I can't hate you. That day something happened by the miracle of Allah. He puts softness in her heart, and she decided to come to my classes on Fridays and Saturdays of my Islamic thing in the masjid. And she became Muslim in 3 months.
Subhanallah.
So Allahu Akbar, the Prophet
Allah
actually
Akbar.
teaches us
Yes.
how to deal with things.
This
Amazing,
is it.
mashallah.
Amazing, mashallah. That's
So,
amazing.
Alhamdulillah, that's what I
That's
wanted to
amazing.
share.
I'm just going to remind everybody you're on Ramadan Special EAVA FM 102.5. We are on Facebook Live. We're on www.ramadan.fm. Your host is Sister Amreen, and I'm here. The topic today is cohesion in turbulent times. The studio number is 212-9324, and the text number is 07450 I really want to hear from our audience and our listeners today. So I'm just going to do a quick shout out on Facebook. So we've got brother named Briscoe who's joined us. Jazakallah khair. We've got brother Margu Masawi saying mend. Jazakallah khair. And he's also saying, yeah, I saw some pictures. Great. We've got brother Yahya. We've got Ahmed. And we've got brother saying, Margub saying, there was a time when, I can't read that.
Allopathic treatments
Okay.
were illegal in Europe.
Okay.
So people went to Spain, I presume he means Islamic Spain,
Yes.
in order to get the degrees in medical science. So I think going back to what we were saying, that what the Muslims have contributed.
What the Muslims contribute. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what we wanted. We want to hear from our listeners. What do you know? That
They know much more than us, I'm sure.
Yes, alhamdulillah. But that's what it's about. We want you to interact. You know, we are on here. We're here on here till 8 o'clock. So please join us. Hopefully you got enough energy just before Iftar to join us and give us your feedback and your comments, inshallah. So far we've had from Brother Shaukat and Auntie Seema. So I'd like to ask you, Sister Farah, in terms of your experience, obviously you were in London, you've now come to Leicester, you've been involved with the open iftars. You know, how is it being back for you? And in terms of Islamically, in terms of how you find it being back in your community?
Being back has been, it's week 4 for me right now. So I'm still adjusting, I think, to life away from London. But alhamdulillah, so far it's been really lovely actually. I think for me, what's really nice is actually being able to spend Ramadan at home with my family after a long time.
Alhamdulillah.
And being able to take part and support the open iftar, the very first open iftar in
How
Leicester.
was that for you? I want to hear from you because you're a
Incredible.
volunteer, mashallah. You'd also were involved in the London one and the Birmingham, is that right? As
So
well?
I attended the London ones when I was actually living in London.
Yes.
And for anyone that doesn't know, so the Open Iftar is basically the flagship campaign organised by a community institution called the Ramadan Tent Project. And it's basically quite literally a tent in the midst of central London, where everyone basically breaks fast with the wider community, shares conversation and shares food in order to learn more about one another and really to turn strangers into friends. And it's a really beautiful, lovely atmosphere. And I think it really speaks to some of the kind of reasons why the Muslim community is so easily demonized in our society today. I think what you were talking about, that sort of lack of understanding or knowledge about Muslims is something that the Open Iftar is aiming to actually essentially develop the understanding of what Ramadan is, what Muslims are doing, why they're fasting, and to do that in the most inviting way, which is to bring people to join us at Iftar, which is really lovely. So I had a wonderful experience of the Open Iftar in London where and it meant a lot to me because I was often coming home from work and I had a lovely flatmate, but she didn't observe Ramadan. So it was really wonderful to be able to go somewhere and actually have iftar with new people. So I didn't feel alone. And it makes such a big difference when you are living away from family to be able to have somewhere to go to break Iftar. But what was really special about it was also the atmosphere that allowed me to make new friends. I met incredible people from a wide variety of backgrounds. I think the last one I attended in London, there was a whole bunch of Quakers there at the Iftar, which was really great. We were taking notes as well, so that was that was quite nice.
I want you to touch on, because Leicester was the first open Iftar, and I was there, alhamdulillah. So in terms of, obviously London's a lot bigger, Leicester's a lot smaller, and it was the first one. How was your experience in particular into the people that came and the conversations that you had?
It was incredible, actually. Alhamdulillah, I was so impressed. I think this is due to the incredible organisation of the volunteers here in Leicester. They put a lot of effort and thought into the event and into making sure that it was, first of all, in somewhere nice and central, in our town hall, that it was accessible, easy for people. They thought about things like bathrooms nearby, etc. Everything was really considered very carefully. And, we made sure that we had both meat options as well as vegetarian options. So the turnout was incredible. We had, I think, over 300 people, and for a first open Iftar, that's just amazing, because the open Iftar has been running in London since 2013, and every night now they're getting about maybe 300 to 400 people, but that's over the course of 7 years, having built up themselves. And so for us to have that on our very first night was just incredible. We had to improvise a little bit on the night because we but do you know what, alhamdulillah,
it's how things
we didn't run out of food.
It wasn't food, it was space. So alhamdulillah, that's perfect, mashallah. But what I liked about the event, that there was everyone from every single faith there, or no faith, and that's what I loved about it. And some of the conversations I managed to have with people, there's more that actually unites us than divides us, but it's having that opportunity to get everyone in the same place together and talk about it, because we're too often, personally in my experience, we're too often in our own little clusters, in our own communities, and we're not reaching out to the people we need to reach out to. So that's in summary what my experience.
I heard the speakers were very good as well that day. I'm only joking.
They were good, alhamdulillah, bar maybe the one. Alhamdulillah, it was great effort put in, and it's a shout out that we need more of these events. But for me personally, being in the community is, why do we need to wait till Ramadan to do something like that? We should be breaking these barriers down within our own communities to get out there, inshallah.
And what a lovely thing that comes to my mind is that Ramadan is a blessing. It's a training for the Muslims.
Of course.
But such a blessing for people who are homeless.
Yes.
Because if they find out that this continues and this goes on, they can come and actually join. And maybe they'll feel at home meeting all these people. So it's such a blessing for them.
Of course it is. It's like you say, it's opening the door, isn't it?
Yes.
And not waiting to just Ramadan, but that hopefully continues till the following year. And we build more communities within that as well, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so that then brings me on to the next questions. What contributions has the Muslim community made to the world? Anyone?
I think we touched upon this.
We have touched upon it already.
Just alhamdulillah, it was just a sister was saying earlier about the post 9/11 generation. So because growing up, for me as a Muslim in this country, it was before 9/11 and a Muslim after 9/11. And alhamdulillah, the generation is called, the millennial generation, Generation M. The Muslim community is one of the largest growing communities in the world. And another thing about the Muslim community, it's a very young community. And the average age in the world is of the Muslim community mean about 30 years old. Okay, so less than a quarter of a percent is under 30-year-old. And in this country, when I travel around, go to university as part of MEND and all works that we do, I can't be failed but to be impressed by mashallah the young generation. And also, yes, we have challenges and we have lots and lots of issues. It really does sow a seed of hope inside me. So the Ramadan Tent Project, it was all young people.
It was all young
sisters.
I have to say, it's mainly all sisters.
It was all sisters. It was all sisters.
Mashallah.
And they did an amazing work. It was selfless. It was organized. They've been fasting all day. Everybody was smiling. But alhamdulillah, we see that they're so proud to be British, which should be the case, and yet so proud to be Muslim without any contradiction. Any contradiction. And that's what we need to create. Alhamdulillah, we find that the Muslim economy as such is worth so much money to this country. It's worth billions.
I'm sure.
Essentially, it's worth billions. And the young Muslims, they find that especially the males, they're mostly into financial industry, and the sisters are into modest dressing.
Yeah.
And this industry is worth trillions in the world.
Yeah, especially
Absolute
now.
trillion. So alhamdulillah, so there's a lot we have contributed.
Yes.
And there's alhamdulillah, even now if we talk, the NHS,
Yes.
23% of the NHS staff who filled in a survey said they come from
A
Muslim
Muslim background.
background or from the Asian community. When you consider we're only 5% of the population, a majority of those are doctors.
Yes.
So we're contributing to the health service. You know, we're contributing to the financial system. In terms of Ramadan, where we give a lot of money,
Yes.
it's how much? It's 100 million
It's
pounds.
100 million.
It's 100 million pounds
Yeah.
just in the month of Ramadan,
Just in Ramadan.
which equates to, I don't know this off my head, I read this earlier, £360 a minute is
Yes.
donated by a Muslim just in the month of Ramadan.
Yeah,
And
subhanallah.
according to Just Giving and another poll, the Muslims from all the faith groups are the most generous givers in this country. So alhamdulillah, we have a lot to be positive about. We have a lot to be proud about. We have a lot of challenges, but it's getting that message out there.
Yeah, it is, alhamdulillah. So just to let you know, we're on Ramadan Special, EAVA FM 102.5. We're on www.ramadan.fm. The studio number is 2129324. Text number is 07450925084. Today's topic, cohesion in turbulent times. I'm joined in the studio by three guests, Brother Shaukat, Auntie Seema and Sister Farah. And we would like to hear from our audience. So we are on Facebook Live also. But please feel free to text in and give us a call, inshallah. Sorry, Sister Auntie Seema, you're about to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, mashallah, that the Muslim women contribution to the world is also quite big, which may be not reminded at times. But I think it was in Egypt that the Muslim women set up schools and hospitals and charitable institutions, and that was in 13th century.
Wow,
So they were
subhanallah.
far ahead from our time in setting things up. And even in Ottoman women,
Yes.
they gave a lot to politics. And so like Razia Sultana, she was the queen of
Yes.
India,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know. So mashallah,
Subhanallah.
Muslim women have done a lot of contribution, which we, I think, need to remind ourselves as well. So we have positive role models in our lives.
But this is what it's about, isn't it? Is the role models that some people see, and especially the millennials, they don't really see. Why is it that they do not see them our Muslim role models? You know, I'm not talking about Sahabas. I'm talking about in this life, the people we've had in history who've done the great work that we've just spoken about. So how do we change that? The mindset for the millennials, and also as adults growing up, to see that the Muslim faith has brought so much, but they don't see it.
No, I think personally the history is extremely important for our young people to know. They don't know the history of Muslim people's contribution, including myself. I'm learning now. As I said, I'm a student for life and I love it. But when I learn, I just say, wow, my God, they've contributed so much to sciences and, as you said, so I think the young people don't know the history, and where will they learn it?
But then that brings the question, then why isn't it taught in our schools? Why isn't it in the education system?
I think that actually points to a much wider question about the history curriculum in general, because actually I know that when I got to university and I was doing sort of wider reading from different continents, I realised just how little I understood about world history in general, not just Islamic history, but so many other countries and recent history. I don't fully understand the historical events that have led up to current issues.
Where we are.
There are so many things that are informed by very recent events. So I think that there's there's a huge lack there. There's a gap for all of us to fill in terms of our Islamic history and understanding, as well as other cultures in general.
Inshallah. Okay, we'll go back a couple of seconds before the break. So we'll come back after the break and we'll continue this discussion. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, you're on Ramadan Special, EAVA FM on 102.5. I am joined in the studio here with my guest, Sister Farah, Auntie Seema, and Brother Shaukat from MEND. So today's topic is cohesion in turbulent times. So before the break, we were talking about education, some of the greatest information and the greatest things that Muslims have actually done within the community. So I'm going to just talk to all of you. So Sister Farah first, what is it in terms of contribution that you've seen within Leicester and generally in terms of what you found in your experience so far?
Well, just within the last couple of weeks taking part in the Open Iftar, which I've already mentioned, I think for me that was just really incredible to see, because there was a great group of volunteers that came together to feed the local community for an iftar, and actually that's a really incredible thing, because a group of young people who are a mix of students, a mix of older professionals, are also young leaders who are going to go on and continue to give more to the local community in lots of other initiatives, inshallah. I think there's so much going on in Leicester and across the country. One thing that's I think Brother Shaukat already touched upon was the actual businesses and business opportunities that Muslims are now taking advantage of and delving into. And I think in Leicester I see so many more Muslim entrepreneurs, young women starting up their own flower arranging businesses. Baker Street was just around the corner from me.
It started from home. Like, everyone has started from home.
Exactly.
And then they've grown into a unit, and then they've actually got a shop. So they've gone through the process of actually learning from scratch and building themselves up, mashallah.
Yes, exactly. And that's so important to the Muslim community as well as to the Leicester community, because businesses are really, really important today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Jazakallah khair for that. Yourself, Auntie Seema?
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I moved to Leicester 3 months ago, and I really think it's so good what Leicester is doing, because I think that Muslims have truly strived to bring community together here in Leicester. And they contribute to local economy, as you just said, by using their zakat or sadaqah here. They are involving all faiths and no faiths in consultation to do things in their life that affect everyone. They are trying to meet regularly with open invitation to all, discuss issues that matters, and finding the solutions, basically, which I have experienced, visited. They seem to be listening to other people and the pulse of other people, that what this whole community or society needs, and which is amazing for the Muslims of Leicester. So good. We can contribute more in youth and helping other voluntary sectors in Leicester, maybe make it far better. So it's looking really good. It's given me so much hope moving to Leicester, because so far I didn't feel this, what I'm feeling here. Alhamdulillah, thank you.
Alhamdulillah, that's good. Jazakallah khair for that. Just to let you know, we're all on Facebook Live, so please join us. We have got some comments, but I can't read that. So just a brother who's put a message saying a sister who's set up her own business, and when she got it doesn't make sense. I can't read that. Sorry. I'd like to hear from our audience as well. So you can contact us 212-9324. The text number is 07450925084. So I come to you next, Brother Shaukat. So we've talked about all the good stuff and what's happening in Leicester, and we've talked about the wider. What about the challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Just quickly touch upon, because I'm very proud of Leicester, because I grew up in this wonderful city. I went away for a few years and I came back again. But alhamdulillah, if you look at this city, mashallah, there is something out there for everybody. There is absolutely no excuse for not volunteering for whatever sector you are. We have, alhamdulillah, amazing organizations in Leicester. We've got organizations that are set up to help the Palestinian people. We've got organizations that, like City Retreat, which gives shelter to the homeless. So locally they're very, very involved. And you've got cracking organizations like Khidma, where if there's floods in parts of the countries where there's no Muslims residing, yet they pile up, they get together and they go and help them out. We've got brother on our Facebook, we're just following us now, brother Naeem Briscoe. Mashallah, unfortunately that event that happened in the Grenfell Tower, he got up from Leicester, galvanized people, went over that night after and helped people there. So there's so many amazing organizations, amazing people from Leicester that makes me really, really proud, mashallah. Yes, we have our challenges, but that is a positive thing that alhamdulillah, we have to work 21 times harder
Well,
to
we do.
readdress that
Well, this is
negative
it.
stereo media. So
Yeah.
going on to your second question, which was
Yes.
about the challenges that we face. Look, as a community, as I mentioned earlier, we're 1.6 billion around the world. We're 2 million in this country. So we're going to have challenges. The Muslim community are not a homogeneous group of people. When you say Muslim, we come from every different aspect,
Yes.
parts of the world. We
Yeah.
speak different languages. We have our own social background, our own culture, which is so strong sometimes that
Yes.
is even overpowering your religious background. And sometimes the two are so mixed up together that people don't know where their religion starts and culture ends,
Yes.
and the other way around. So that is some of the challenges that we face. Just statistics and figures, I want to bore you with a little bit with them, but not for too long. In terms of
It's important,
education,
though.
in terms of education, the Muslim community, 26% of the Muslim community do not have a higher education, okay, which is a little bit higher than the national average of about 20%.
Yes.
So we could do better, but alhamdulillah, our sisters are getting much more educated now, and education is taking place. Social housing.
Yes.
Muslims live more in social housing than people from other faiths or no faiths. About 50% of the Muslims live in the 10% of the most deprived areas in the country. So Blackburn, I'm sorry about people who come from this place, but Tower Hamlets, they have the poorest in terms of council. So Muslims live in overcrowdedness, they live in poor areas. Health is a big issue.
Well, then it has a knock-on effect to
It
the health,
does.
doesn't
It does. Apparently, according to a poll, 50% of Muslim men over the age of 50 describe themselves as in bad health or very bad health. And that increases for our sisters over the age of 60. And that proportionally is much higher than other people, because only 17% think they're in poor health. So we've got socio-economic issues, we've got health issues, but inshallah, by working together and working harder, we will get there.
Yeah.
Because if you just look at the positive, I know we don't have that many, but we have Muslims that are winning Olympic gold medals in Muhammad Farah and marathons.
Yes,
now we have a sister, mashallah, who has done so much for the Muslim community just by baking cake for the Queen in Nadia Hussein.
mashallah,
We've got Moin at the moment who wears his 3 lines with pride on his jumper, playing for England for cricket. So alhamdulillah, we do have Ramadan. Mo Salah, who's not British but he's a Muslim, and his contribution has been amazing. So there are positive contributions. We just alhamdulillah need a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we change the narrative then? How do we change
I think Sister
the
had a very
perception?
good point, because it's actions. Actions speak louder than her actions change one individual. And we have to work in a multi-pronged effort.
This
We
is
have
what
to-
I was coming to.
So,
How do we go, let it cascade into the community that we live in?
We all have to. The hardest thing is, and the most important thing, and we talk about this all the time, is be united.
Yes.
We've got so many skill sets. We have to complement each other and support each other.
Yeah.
As an organisation, we tackle Islamophobia.
Yes.
That is our strength. If somebody came with a housing issue, I would hand you over to somebody else. If somebody came about the Palestinian issue, I would hand you to somebody else. Education issue, I'll hand you over to somebody else, because there are other Muslim communities and organisations dealing with this.
Yeah.
So we all have to be united, use our strengths, and inshallah we will see the Ummah progress.
Yeah. So within our own community, I mean, we were talking about this earlier before the interview actually, is so outside in Ramadan, everyone's volunteering, everyone's doing their thing, mashallah. How do we carry on after Ramadan? What do we need to see the change within our community? I'll come to you, Sister Farah, first.
I think that we need to, in the spirit of Ramadan, really,
Yes.
Ramadan is not just about the 1 month. It's about reflection. It's about developing habits, thinking about what we're doing in order so that we can try to continue those good habits beyond Ramadan. And it's the same when it comes to what we can do to support the Ummah, as well as what we can do for our local communities and the world, really.
Yes.
So I think that there are a few different ways that we can do that. I think, one, we can help one another, support one another, but also help one another just in keeping up hope, I think.
Yes.
I
So
think
raising each other.
yes, I think that it's really, really important now more than ever to not sort of fall prey to cynicism.
Yes.
And to allowing ourselves to fall into sort of a victim situation and feeling that we're not able to get out of it. There are so many examples that we've just discussed now.
Yes.
Of individuals and communities and organizations that are doing some great work.
Yeah.
I think we need to encourage one another. We need to find out about these, tell other Muslims, tell our friends, and bring people together in that.
And get on platforms like coming on radio. Alhamdulillah, we are all volunteers here, and for you guys as guests to give your time, that's giving you time to the community as well, and that to me speaks volumes. And I think what often, as you've said, a lot of people have the kind of view that, you know, things are so bad, they have that pessimism, which to a degree I understand, but then be the change within yourself. Don't complain about it. Don't be a armchair critic. You know, that's one of the things that I always say is don't be an armchair critic, but actually do something about it actively. You might not necessarily have the skills, but speak to somebody that does, and they'll put you in the right direction.
Yeah,
you know,
That's what I said, it's absolutely essential. We're at a very critical time, and we really do need to come together now, because there is, if you look at Europe, there's such a rise in the far right, and they have only one policy, and it's an anti-Islamic policy.
Yes.
You know, you have a village in Poland which has been set up so Muslims are not allowed to live in that village.
Yes.
They have banners and posters in Czech Republic, which has such a small percentile of Muslim population against Muslims. So and they're galvanizing. Austria just last week approved that young school children shouldn't wear the hijab at school. So they've essentially banned the hijab. France, I mean, we hear horrendous stories there, and the support of Le Pen, the party, you know, where feeding of even pork to Muslim children has become the norm there. We hear tales when we speak to organizations similar to MEND in France. So there's this rise of the far right, and then there's a narrative in this country. You know, irresponsible politicians saying things about sisters wearing niqabs. You know, when they know full well what they're saying. They know full well what they're saying, and this has repercussions on our streets. So as you were saying very earlier on, is the sisters are very much more evident Islamically. You get much more abused, and unfortunately, as an organization, we are dealing with our sisters who are punched and kicked and etc. etc. So we really do have to come together, and it's a real critical moment. And today being election day as well, it's really, really important. If you haven't voted, to please go out and vote and make a stance, inshallah.
It's interesting what you just said, because I confronted Jack Straw on this issue in the parliament. I was in the parliament that day, and he was having tea, and I went up to him and I said, Mr. Straw, what did you mean that we talk about freedom of speech, freedom of everything, and that's why we are so proud to be British, that freedom is with responsibility.
Yes.
And I don't think you were responsible in your statement.
Jack Straw, when he said he wouldn't see sisters in niqab in his, that's really interesting, because we had a hustings. We held, as men held a hustings in Blackburn, and Jack Straw was an MP for thing, and he had his audience in front of him, which was majority of the Muslim community. So one of the brothers, who the founder of MEND, actually chaired the hustings and said, "Okay, Jack, you made a statement that you will not see sisters in a niqab in your surgery. This is your audience. What do you say now?" And he said, "No, I was misquoted." And I will see sisters.
Said that to me.
I will see sisters in niqab, and you know. So if we challenge our politicians, we need to. Yeah, we need to challenge our media. We need to challenge all within a legal framework that's available to us.
But there is something that does bother me, and that challenge for me is personally very real, is about the gender issue now, which is coming into education.
That's a whole.
And I think we need to have a whole program on that as well, because it is a real. I mean, as it is, the youths are very confused about their identity, and now giving them more.
Well, do we agree for sex education to be taught at the age of 4? I don't think one does, regardless of what faith or background you are.
Even a lot of my English friends don't want
Exactly. So a child should be allowed to be a child. And on the whole RSC thing, I think that is, like you say, a whole nother topic. So we have about 10 minutes left. So Jazakallah khair for joining us on Ramadan Special EAVA FM. We're on 102.5. We're on www.ramadan.fm. We're on Facebook Live. We have had just a text saying the brother is spot on about Muslims being so diverse. The diverse Muslim communities within Leicester is beautiful, but also presents barriers to real cohesion. I see the young people working differently to the older generation who are more stuck in their ways. The future, inshallah, will be different.
Mashallah. What we must acknowledge, though, that we are sitting on the shoulders of giants. So the challenges that our parents and our grandparents faced in the UK was very, very different. If you imagine, some of them came in the swinging 60s from villages back home. And their first concern was to build a mosque. You know, with the flashing lights and the distractions that they would have had. Mashallah, so we must never forget their contribution.
Never forget what they did.
But the challenges today, as the text message said, is very, very, we have to evolve. We have to evolve.
So we've talked about evolving, we've talked about changes. So how do we how do we empower ourselves within our communities? Because what I'm finding, being in the community, it's the same people who are doing the volunteering. So it's the same people who are leading conversations, being on platforms, maybe writing articles, being in the media. How do we, I'm talking us little Leicester, how do we change that? What else do we need to do to change these attitudes within our own communities first?
I mean, I think we can make a huge amount of change just as individuals in our own households. I think, we've just discussed and touched upon how important and how real and huge the issues facing us right now are. And I think as a result, everyone needs to be quite ambitious with what we're aiming to achieve. And I think that the biggest thing we can do is to encourage one another to pursue whatever interests that we have, whatever skills that we want to develop, but to do so and strive for excellence in those. If you have an interest, if you even an inkling of an interest in media or the newspaper, find out about what's going on in Leicester. Or if your son or daughter does, tell them to pursue that with everything that they have.
Yes.
Tell them to use all of their contacts in Leicester, reach out, speak to one another. That text message was talking about the obstacles, because we have various different faith groups which are incredible and really special to Leicester. One of the ways to overcome that is to get involved with other faith groups, get involved with reach out to other organizations. It's not, there's a huge amount of great work that the Muslim organizations in Leicester do. There's also a lot of great work that other organizations will do. And we can be involved in those,
exactly.
and vice versa.
Exactly, and that's what it is. It's about getting outside ourselves, but also empowering ourselves. So, like you said, politics, understand what's going on locally for a start, as Brother Sheikh has talked about as well. And I know MEND do some workshops and classes on that, so we can talk about that and how people can get in touch with MEND as well. What about yourself, Auntie Seema? Any kind of bits of advice in terms of...
I personally, I love youths, and I think that youths are not being heard. They are being isolated by my generation. We don't listen to them. We don't involve them. So it's become very important for me that we should involve our youth, because they are the future for us.
Absolutely.
And empower them by listening to them, by consulting with them and getting things done together, which experience I've had in Woking, Surrey, and it really was amazingly successful.
Yeah.
And it was open to all faiths, but somehow the other faiths did not choose to join. Their youths weren't joining, but the Muslim youths were doing amazing work there. So I think the youths need to be worked on.
Yes.
How we do it, we can consult it and bring them on board. But we need to empower our youths, so they feel that they have been heard. They feel that they have a voice, and they feel that they can contribute to the society.
Yeah,
inshallah.
absolutely. I mean, I'll just give an example with some of the brothers I know. There's a one-step team. They do some amazing work, mashallah, in Leicester. And yes, they are looking at the youth and looking at the things that matter to them, because they felt that they weren't being heard. So in the community that they're at large. So now that's, they have workshops every 2 weeks, and they choose different topics. And some of them are actually on the radio station as well. But what my concern is, the youth are doing their own thing, but it's also we need to guide them. But also we need to give them a platform to, like you said, allow them to have their voice.
Yes.
But also that let's not just be in our own Muslim community, but we need to take it further.
Yes.
You look at the Christian faith and the Jewish faith, mashallah, they do their own thing. And they do it really well as well, mashallah. So we need to take the lead from that.
Absolutely.
As well.
I mean, what we need to do is sit here in Leicester today, and for those that have children at home, look at your children.
Yes.
For those that don't, look at what our forefathers have done. And if we want to stay in this country, and if we want to make this country for our children as safe and secure and as beautiful and as freer for them to practice their faith as much as possible, we have to do something today.
Yes.
And there is no more initiative. For me, I have children, and when I used to hear the radio talking about my religion, when I used to pick up certain newspapers speak about my religion, and I thought this drip effect is creating such a toxic environment that it's not going to be the same Britain or the same Leicester that I grew up in.
Yes.
And if they were to turn around to me one day when they grow older and say, "Dad, this was all happening while you were just busy making money all the time or whatever, what have you done in creating no safe roads?" So there is, and we spoke earlier, there's so many things that we can get involved in. And for me, another thing that second point is we should always get involved in organizations or charities that are not directly seen as Muslim organizations.
Yes,
you know, the
important.
Prophet ﷺ was a rahmah to all mankind.
Yeah.
So animals, you know, kindness to animals. You know, he was an environmentalist. You know, one of the stories or the hadith that really fascinates me, that even if you're in an ocean, don't waste water whilst you're doing wuzu.
Exactly.
So I mean, that's such an environmentalist statement. Don't waste things. You know, so there's so many things that we can get involved in, and the more we get involved, the more we get out there, the interfaith work will become natural. The dialogue will become natural, because at the moment we're only seen as a very insular, and this narrative of us and them, and then we don't help ourselves sometimes in the language that we use as well. You know, so we really do have a lot of challenges, but we have to do this today for a better future tomorrow. And one of the quotes that I often use is from Rumi, is that, you know, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I want to change myself.
Absolutely.
So the change comes from within. Inshallah.
It does, absolutely. It goes... one sec, I was just going to touch on Sister Faraz, but it's great what you said. It's the whole, the pessimism view and the victim mentality. Yes, we know stuff happens, but in order for us to move forward as a community and start within our homes, and like Brother Shaukat says, speaking to our children and having these conversations, how are we going to change that mindset? That, you know, we have so many resources at hand. When you go to other countries, they don't have a right to vote. There is no diplomacy there. You know, it is a dictatorship in other countries. Let's be real, right? And so they don't have the opportunities that we do. So for me personally, being in Leicester, born and bred here, is use the opportunities that you've got and make the most of it, because you know, we have every right. Why shouldn't we? You know?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Next, I'll bring to your sisters. And we have about 2 minutes left to the end of the show, inshallah.
I just want to say, you asked me what inspires us as well.
Yes.
So I just wrote from the Prophet Muhammad
Sallallahu
said,
Alaihi Wasallam.
do you know what is better than charity and fasting and prayer? It is keeping peace and good relations between people, as quarrels and bad feelings destroy mankind.
Subhanallah.
So I think he puts it in a nutshell how we
Mashallah.
are going to take it forward. Inshallah.
Absolutely.
And hope, sorry, I just want to say
Hope.
about when you said hope, and Farah too, that he was saying that if you are growing or putting a seed in the ground, in the earth, and if you see the day of judgment from the corner of your eyes, do not stop doing that action.
Yes.
So the hope is
Subhanallah.
for Muslims right till then, till
right,
eternity.
till your last breath. Yeah, it's always going to be
Thank
the constant keep
Yeah.
giving. That's what it is, isn't it? Mashallah. Yourself, quote from yourself, Sister Farsi. You have a book
Yes,
open.
I've got it ready. So this is actually from a poem by Ben Okri called As Clouds Do Drift. We can join that growing fight to stop our world being plunged into night. We can wake to the power of our voice, change the world with the power of our choice. But there's nothing we can do if we do not begin to think anew. We're not much more than how we think. In our minds, we swim or sink.
Subhanallah, I love that. That is beautiful. I really, really love that. Mashallah, Jazakallah khair for that. That leads me to say Jazakallah khair for everybody for joining me. Brother Shaukat from Mend, you know how to get in touch with Mend. You can go into the Mend website, which is it www.mend.org.uk, and you can get in touch with the Leicester team.
Please do.
We need volunteers. Everyone, you know, all I'm saying to you is, my parting words is, get involved in your community and don't just look at your Muslim institutions. Look further and be the change within our own community, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for all of you joining. We've had some great Facebook messages. So those of you that have, Jazakallah khair. And hopefully you all have a blessed Ramadan. Stay tuned. We've got Sheikh Shafi for the Iftar show after myself in about 20 seconds. Inshallah, please listen in. And any comments or feedback, please email us, which is on www.ramadan.fm, inshallah. Be myself, Sister Amreen, your host, and my guest, Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, you're listening to the Iftar program on EAVA FM, Radio Ramadan on 102.5 FM with me, Shafi Chowdhury, until around the 9 o'clock mark, inshallah. So yesterday we spent a lot of time, well, not a lot, but a little bit of time discussing the historic event of Ghazwatu Badr, the Battle of Badr, the very first and the most decisive of Islam's military battles, in which the Messenger of God himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, partakes, and where 313 have to take a stance for the sake of truth and justice, for the sake of faith and revelation, for the sake of what's good and what's right, against the most incredible odds. Opposition, the Quraysh are 1,000 strong, and they're very, very well tooled and kitted out for battle. And against all of those odds, they had to face these things. So we spoke about that yesterday. Today I wanted to discuss a hadith from Riyadh al-Salihin. It's a hadith that's related by Imams al-Bukhari and Muslim. Imam Muslim rather. But it's a very important one. And Surah al-Buruj, which is right in the final juz of the Quran, Surah al-Buruj, makes reference to this. So I wanted to share this story and then have a few thoughts and reflections on the subject and the learning from this. So this is a hadith that's related by Suhaib, sometimes known as Suhaib al-Rumi, Suhaib the Roman, although he's actually an Arab by ethnicity, but he spent some time living in amongst the Byzantians, so he becomes known as Suhaib al-Rumi. عن صهيب رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: كان ملك في من قبلكم وكان له ساحر فلما كبر قال للملك إني قد كبرت فابعث إلي غلاما أعلمه السحر. Suhaib al-Rumi tells us that the Messenger of God, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, there was a king in bygone days, and this king had a magician, a sorcerer. He was like the king's wizard. And when the magician became aged, he said to the king, I've now become an old man, so will you send me a young apprentice to whom I can impart knowledge of magic? فَبَعَثَ إِلَيْهِ غُلَامًا يُعَلِّمُهُ. So the king appointed a young man to come to the magician to learn from him. وَكَانَ فِي طَرِيقِهِ إِذَا سَأَلَكَ رَاهِبٌ. Now this young man, he'd make his way from his home to go and learn from this magician the dark arts. But on the way was the hermitage of a rahib. A rahib is like a scholar of scripture. So today we speak about an alim or an imam. In the Jewish tradition, they refer to as rahbaniya or a rahib. So he's really a monk. He's someone who's turned his back to on worldly affairs. He's a rahib. And actually they're much more in the Christian tradition than they are because the Quran speaks about rahbaniyatan ibtada'uha ma katabnaha alayhim. Monasticism is the thing that they, i.e. the Christians, came up with, which we did not enjoin upon them. إِلَّا ابْتِغَاءَ رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ. But they did so seeking God's good pleasure. So this rahib or this monk who's on the... And again, the hadith is interesting because it places the rahib as the positive, in a positive light. So people in the past, and their traditions, it's easy for Muslims to look back at history and say, anyone who doesn't worship the way we worship, or doesn't practice the way we practice, or doesn't believe the way we believe, there's, it's all in vain. But here we have the case of a rahib, of a monk, and how he engages with this young man, a young magician's apprentice. فقعد إليه فسمع كلامه فأعجبه. The young man who was meant to be going to the magician and encounters this monk en route, sits with the monk for some time, listens to his speech, and the words of the monk have an impact on him. وكان إذا أتى الساحر مر بالراهب وقعد إليه. And so this became a regular practice of his. Whenever he'd go to the magician, he'd pass by the monk and spend a bit of time sitting with him first. فإذا أتى الساحر ضربه. Then when he'd get to the magician would beat him. He'd beat him for saying, "Why are you so late? Why do you always come here? Why are you so tardy in your timekeeping? You should get here sooner." But of course, the young man is fascinated by the teachings of one who his learning, his teachings aren't based on how to change, a rope into a snake, or how to change water into wine, or how to change rocks into gold. It's not the alchemy of stuff that's fascinated him, but because that's what the magician teaches. But what's captured his attention is someone who can speak to him about the creator of things, the creator of heaven and earth, the creator of life and death, the creator of day and night, the creator of matter and its owner. الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى. Allah describes himself as the one who gave all things their form, that he created them, he gave them their physical form, then he guided them to their purpose. So this young man would he on route to the magician, he'd find himself drawn irresistibly to sit and listen and learn from the monk. And then when you get to the magician would beat him. And yet that didn't dissuade him, so he continued doing this for some time. Until فشكى ذلك إلى الراهب فقال إذا خشيت الساحر فقل حبسني أهلي وإذا خشيت أهلك فقل حبسني الساحر. So when the young man became, he was getting beaten for being late all the time. He told the monk, and the monk said, "Well, if you're delayed getting to the magician, and the magician's going to be cross with you, you can always tell him that you were delayed with your family. And when you're delayed with your family, when you're delayed getting back home, and it's because you've sat again with me, with the monk, and you're afraid that they're going to have a go at you, you can tell them that you were delayed with the magician." فبينما هو على ذلك إذ أتى على دابة عظيمة قد حبست الناس فقال اليوم أعلم الساحر أفضل أم الراهب أفضل. So one day, as he was doing this, so he's living a bit of a double life, this young man. He's spending time learning from a man of faith, and then he's having to go and be an apprentice to a man who practices the dark arts and trickery and deception and illusions. So he's having to straddle these two worlds. And while he's in this situation, إذ أتى على دابة عظيمة, one day he comes across a great terrifying beast. And this beast has cornered some people, and they're terrified, and they're stuck. They can't move. And this young man thinks to himself, today I'll get a chance to find out which one of these is most powerful, and which one of their teachings is most fruitful, most beneficial. الساحر أفضل أم الراهب أفضل? Is it the magician who comes out on top, or will it be the monk? So he took a stone, and he said, Allahumma in kana amru rahibi ahabba ilayk min amri sahir faqtul hadhi dabata hatta yamdi an-nas. And he took the stone and he made a prayer, and he said, "Oh Allah, if what the monk is upon and what he teaches and what he lives by and what he practices, if that is better and more beloved to you than the ways of the magician, then kill this beast as I throw this stone, so that the people may pass. So he's sort of saying to Allah, if the teachings of the one who's taught me about you are the true teachings and are beloved to you, then for his sake, kill this beast as I throw a stone, so that the people are freed. فَرَمَاهَا فَقَتَلَهَا وَمَضَى النَّاسُ. And as he threw the stone, the beast is slain and the people are free. فَأَتَى الرَّاهِبَ فَأَخْبَرَهُ. The young man comes to the monk, and he informs him and tells him what's happened. And the monk says, "Oh dear son, today you are better than me. Today you are better than me. You had so much faith in that dua that you made, that Allah Jalla wa Ala, through his power, because it's not the rock, it's not the stone that you threw at the animal that killed the animal, but it's the strength of your prayers and the strength of your conviction. And so today you are better than me. قَدْ بَلَغَ مِنْ أَمْرِكَ مَا أَرَى وَإِنَّكَ سَتُبْتَلَى فَإِذَا ابْتُلِيتَ فَلَا تَدُلَّ عَلَيْهِ. And the young and the monk said, I can see that you've attained to a very high station, and you are going to be put to test, because anyone who attains to any heights, whatever that might be, it might be in worldly matters, it might be in matters of faith. Anyone who attains to a status of any description is put to a test. That's the nature of this world. Allah Azza wa Jal says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ. He created death and he created life, all of it to be a test for you. So it's not actually, it's when we feel that everything is running smoothly and everything's going, that's a break from the rule. That's an exception to the rule. That's something extraordinary. The norm, actually, the truth is, life is created to be a test, and we will be tried and we will be tested in various different capacities and ways. Allah says, لَتُبْلَوُنَّ فِي أَمْوَالِكُمْ وَأَنفُسِكُمْ. You will certainly be tried in your property and wealth, as well as in yourselves. That's the nature of this world, the nature of this life. And this is why one of the predecessors said, لا تستغرب الأقدار ما دمت مقيما في هذه الدار. لا تستغرب الأقدار. Don't be surprised or astonished by things that ruin, spoil your day or muddy up the waters. So long as you are a resident of this abode, as long as you live on planet Earth, as long as you're still in al-hayat al-dunya, the immediacy of this life, then it shouldn't surprise you that you have to encounter time and time again things that throw you, and things that rock you, and things that spoil the perfect day that you were hoping for, or the perfect week, or the perfect career, or the perfect marriage, or the perfect friendship, whatever those things may be. Because the nature of this world is that it's finite, and so everything in it is also finite. Nothing lasts forever. So this rabbi, I've got to stop saying rabbi, it's rahib, which is a monk. The rabbis are al-ahbar. The Quran also uses the word rabbi. The Arabic equivalent of rabbi is rabbaniyun, which is literally people of Arab, people of God. Anyway, so the godly people. So the monk, this Christian monk, says to the young boy, today you are at a higher station, have attained now to a higher station than I. And you are most certainly going to be put to test or tribulate. You will face a tribulation. When that happens, the rabbi, the monk says, فَلَا تَدُلَّ عَلَيْهِ. Please don't spill the beans about me. Don't tell people about me. And that's the state that happens. Now this young boy says, I won't tell anyone, because he's afraid, the monk's afraid, if people find out about me, then maybe I'm going to face. And although this was a righteous man, and a man who worshipped and he taught faith, and he had dedicated his life to worshipping God, he was also afraid. And not everyone has to be the same. Not everyone has to be, unless you're willing to lay down your life for Allah, you're not a true believer. That's not everybody. There are some people who will quietly live their lives worshipping God and seeking goodness and trying to teach people goodness, but they're not everyone has to be someone who rushes to the head of the battlefield, or someone who's ready to lay down their lives at the drop of a hat. There are people who are in different stages. This young man, then, his story continues. وَكَانَ الْغُلَامُ يُبْرِئُ الْأَكْمَهَ وَالْأَبْرَصَ وَيُدَاوِي النَّاسِ مِنْ سَائِرِ الْأَدْوَاءِ. God gave this young man great powers of curing the leper and a person who has skin problems. That's the al-abras. And the one who is born blind, al-akmah, is the person who's born without any, born blind. You see, if you lose your sight later on, then, some corrective surgery today can help you to regain that. But a person who's born blind, who's visually impaired from birth, that's a much more remarkable feat, to be able to restore them to sight. And this young man had Allah given the power to do that, which is quite reminiscent of what Allah gives Jesus. Isa alayhi in the Quran, Allah says about him, وَأُبْرِئُ الْأَكْمَهَ وَالْأَبْرَصَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَأُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. He had the power to restore to fullness of health the leper and the blind from birth, and also to bring back to life the recently deceased, those who had died, by the permission of Allah. وَيُدَاوِي النَّاسِ مِنْ سَائِرِ الْأَدْوَاءِ. And this young boy was now able to treat people and give them healing from many forms of ailment, many different ailments, many forms of sickness. وَسَمِعَ جَلِيسٌ لِلْمَلِكِ كَانَ قَدْ عَمِي. There was a member of the king's court who heard about this man, this young boy, and he'd lost his sight. So he brought many gifts. فَأَتَاهُ بِهَدَايَا كَثِيرًا فَقَالَ مَا هَاهُنَا لَكَ أَجْمَعْ إِنْ أَنْتَ شَفَيْتَنِي. He brought all of these gifts, and he said to the boy, if you're able to cure me, all of this is for you. I've collected all of this for you. The boy said, قال إني لا أشفي أحدا إنما يشفي الله تعالى. And this is because he's a boy who's found his maker. The people are flocking to him, and they're bringing all of these gifts, and they're throwing them at his feet, and they're begging for him to heal them, because he's become this great healer. He says, لا أشفي أحدا, I don't heal anyone. إنما يشفي الله تعالى. It is but Allah the Exalted who gives healing, who restores to health. فإن آمنت بالله تعالى دعوت الله فشفاك. So if you're prepared to affirm faith in God, in Allah the Exalted, then I will pray to Allah for you. I'll make dua for you, and He will grant you shifa. فآمن بالله تعالى فشفاه الله تعالى. And then this member of the king's court, he accepts faith, he embraces faith, and Allah Jalla wa Ala, he affirms faith in God, and God grants him shifa. فأتى الملك فجلس إليه كما كان يجلس. And then he came back to the king and attended his assembly as he had done previously. فقال له الملك من رد عليك بصرك. The king said, who's restored your eyesight for you? How are you now able to see again? Because he was someone whose eyesight had really begun to deteriorate. قال ربي. And the member of the king's court, this man said, my Lord, my God, my Rabb. قال ولك رب غيري. The king said, what, and you have some God other than me? You have a Lord other than I? فقال ربي وربك الله. The courtier said, my Lord and your Lord is Allah. فأخذه فلم يزل يعذبه حتى دل على الغلام. The king had the man arrested, and then he had him tormented and beaten and tortured until the courtier finally gave in and informed the king about the young man who had played the pivotal role in restoring to him his eyesight through prayer, but also getting him to recognize God. فجيء بالغلام فقال له الملك أي بني قد بلغ من سحرك ما تبرئ الأكمه والأبرص وتفعل وتفعل. The young man was brought into the presence of the king, and the king said, Son, your magic has developed to the point that you're now able to cure the leper and the blind and do such and such things, these marvelous feats. The young man said, قال إني لا أشفي أحدا إنما يشفي الله تعالى. The young man said, I don't cure anyone. It is but God, the Exalted, who restores, who gives healing. فأخذه فلم يزل يعذبه حتى دل على الراهب. Well, the same fate awaited the young man, and the king captured him, arrested him, and punished him, and hurt him, and tortured him, until he too gave in and mentioned the monk. فجيء بالراهب فقيل له ارجع عن دينك. Well, the monk was now sent for, and he was brought into the presence of the king. And he was commanded to abandon his faith. فأبى, but he refused. فدعا بالمنشار فوضع المنشار في مفرق رأسه. The man refused to, and so this is the same man who earlier had said, if you're going to face tribulation when that day comes, please don't tell them about me. Well, now that the young man succumbed or relented once he was faced with such torture, and he mentions the monk. The monk doesn't begrudge him, nor is he of such weak faith that he gives in. He stands firm by his faith. So he refuses to reject his faith. فَدَعَا بِالْمِنْشَارِ. The king called for a saw to be brought forward. فَوُضِعَ الْمِنْشَارِ فِي مَفْرِقِ رَأْسِهِ. And the saw is placed at the center of his scalp. فَشَقَّهُ حَتَّى وَقَعَ شِقَّاهُ. And he was sawn in half until his two halves fell apart. ثم جيء بجليس الملك فقيل له ارجع عن دينك. And then the king's courtier was called for, and he too, it was said to him, he was told, leave your deen, leave your religion. فأبى. And he also refused. And this is a man who'd spent his whole life in the king's court, in the king's palace. There are people who are born into a life of luxury, and they're born into a life of opulence and wealth and privilege. But then when faith grabs hold of them, they too get the ultimate taste, something that money and palaces and luxury could never have afforded, and their lives had changed. We're going to take a quick break now, but we'll be back to continue the story straight after this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, on Ramadan Special, EAVA 102.5 FM, you're listening to the Iftar show with me, Shafi Chowdhury, for this last half an hour until 9 o'clock, and then we'll have a little bit of time, because I think it's important that we have a bit of time for dua before Iftar. You don't want to literally just be listening to the radio. Ramadan, by the way, it challenges us. It takes a lot out. These are very long days, aren't they? They've been very long for the last few years. But to be fasting, and when you have work, and when you have the kids, and when you have various other obligations and commitments, it's not easy. But this last point of the day is so precious in the sight of Allah. And so, after you've taken yourself this whole stretch, don't lose the last couple of minutes. Don't lose the opportunity to make a small dua, even a very quick one. Now, today we were looking at reading the hadith of a young man whose story is captured in the start of Surah Al-Buruj. And the hadith of Suhaib al-Rumi relates his story in some detail, and it's been narrated for us by Imam Muslim. So I wanted to share that story with you, and I've got halfway. So let's continue. So just a quick recap for anyone who's joining. There was the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, in days gone by, there was a king who had a magician or a sorcerer. When the king's magician became old, he became elderly, he asked the king for an apprentice. So the king appointed a bright young man to be his apprentice, and instructed this young man to come every day to learn from the magician. And the young man started doing this. One day as he's making his way, he noticed what I guess was a small hut or a hermitage, and he looked inside and he noticed a monk, a rahib, a monk. So someone of the Christian tradition, a person who's shuns the world and worldly things and has dedicated himself to the worship of God. And these people are often extremely wise, and they have a great and powerful spiritual aura about them. And this young boy was fascinated by the monk, and he spent some time listening to him. However, this delayed him. So when he gets to the sorcerer, the magician beats him and says, why are you running late and not coming here on time? So he tells the monk, and the monk said to him, maybe, stop on your way there and on your way back. And if the magician questions you for being late, tell them that you were delayed at home with your family. And if your family question you for getting back late, and it's because you've been with me, tell them you were delayed because you were with the magician. And so this is the kind of arrangement they have. Until one day, this boy, who's living a bit of a double life, on the one hand, he's learning about God and faith and the creator of heaven and earth and his great plan for us as the children of Adam. And these teachings are, part of the fascination of Revelation is that it's telling us things which deep in our own souls we recognize there's a truth to. And this is why the Quran refers to itself as in huwa illa dhikrun lil alamin. This is a remembrance or a reminder for the worlds. Nothing in this is the point of Revelation isn't to come and tell you something totally new and unknown, but to remind you of truths buried in the depths of your soul. Your soul will recognize the truths of faith. And so this young boy was fascinated. But on the one hand, he's learning from this monk who's teaching him about faith and God and the purpose for our existence and who we are. Faith also does that. Faith, a big part of what faith teaches is who we are. And who we are isn't, I'm a electrical engineer who lives in the Midlands, who recently married with a kid or two. Or those are our current circumstances. The truth of who we are, it's not even I'm of this ethnicity or of that gender, and I'm into this sports, or I'm into, you know, this area of professionally. That's again not who. Those are accidental. The essence of who we are is we are sons and daughters of Adam. That's true for every human being that's ever lived after Adam and Eve. Every human being that's ever lived. You're a son or a daughter of Adam. And as sons and daughters of Adam, الناس يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Allah makes a very universal call when he says, O humankind, O humanity, O sons and daughters of Adam, worship your Lord who created you and created those who came before you, in order that you may come to a place of being with God, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, that you may be in a state of taqwa. So this young boy, on the one hand, he's learning all of this stuff. On the other hand, he's having to learn about the dark arts. And that's also, you see, the dunya, the world, the material world that we live in, can also be exceedingly fascinating and a great distraction, except in the distraction is destruction. There's a big peril in the theatrics because you can amuse yourself to death. There's always something there that's happening. But if you apply yourself to a thing and you work hard and you're diligent and you push yourself, then you will ultimately excel in that thing. And the thing may be about how to change or create the illusion of changing matter, of pulling, whatever, these magicianal feats. And people watch magicians even today, and street magicians and others, and they're televised, and they're still flabbergasted. And the Quran talks about magic, by the way, and it tells us about how two angels from the heavens have come down, and Harut and Marut in Babylon, and they have to, as a test to the people, they are entrusted with sihr. But Allah says, وَمَا يُعَلِّمُونَ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. They wouldn't teach magic to anyone until they'd first warn. So the disclaimer that you have to, they'd make a disclaimer. We have been sent as a test. Don't reject truth and faith by learning these things and practicing them. Yet people wanted to learn them. And Allah says it wasn't just Harut and Marut. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. So it's what the devils have recited and taught people. But in the first instance, it's what the angels came down with to Babylon as a test for the Babylonians. This young man then, he's studying these two worlds, one which is righteous, one which and holy, the other which is profane and sacrilegious. And one day he encounters this great wild beast, and he thinks this is the time to find out which of these is the more powerful. And so he prays to the God that the monk has taught him about, Allah, Lord of heaven and earth, the one God. And he says, Oh Allah, if what the monk has taught me, and if what the monk is practicing is the true way and is beloved in your sight, and better than what the magician is upon, then strike dead this beast as I throw this stone, and let the people free. Let the people go free. And he does this, and the beast falls and it dies, and suddenly he's, and then he goes to the monk and he tells the monk this is what happened, and the monk recognizes today his student has surpassed him. And he says, this day you are better than I. And I can see that your station, Allah, and sometimes Allah does that. Sometimes Allah brings people for whom He has destined greatness. He brings them to teachers too. Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali went to and he studied off teachers. People don't know the names of most of his teachers, but they know Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. Sometimes great people or people for whom greatness was destined, are brought to good teachers. Good, but maybe not outstanding. Maybe not teachers who will be remembered by history. But that what is taken, because the essence of truth is very simple. And anyone with a good heart can impart that with faithfulness. It's how that's embraced and how it's lived by that makes the difference. The difference between a great man of God and, a sort of an average Muslim isn't that the great man or woman of God, the greatly righteous, don't have another set of special scriptures that they live by. They don't have some other surahs of the Quran that you and I don't have. They don't have other hadiths or hadith books that they refer to. They have the same thing that you have, except they put into practice what we fail to put into practice, what we pay lip service to. Anyway, so this young man, his teacher, the monk, says to him, "Today you're better than I. And I can see that you have attained to a higher status than I ever could. And I'm the one who taught you." And he gave thanks to Allah. But he said, "You're going to be tested. Some trials are going to befall you. When that day happens, please don't tell the people about me. Or don't tell the king about me." Because the king is someone who fancies himself and likes to be worshipped by the people, as many of these kings do. They like to be gods or demigods. So, the young man then sets about calling people to God. But anyone who's sick, he makes a dua, and then he invites them to Allah. And he tells them, embrace the faith and I will pray, and the power of prayer, because this young man has become mustajabud da'awat, or mustajabud du'a, someone whose prayer is readily accepted by Allah. And the thing that he prays for is granted with speed on earth. So he's become a person whose dua is accepted. So he'll say to the people, someone who's suffering, maybe somebody who's suffering leprosy, or a person who was born blind, or someone suffering from any other kind of ailment or hardship, and say, the answer to all things belongs with God. Believe in God and I will pray for you, and God will grant you shifa. And this begins, and Allah would grant that to him. Now, this doesn't always happen. Today you have a lot of fake people, fake healers, who go around and they pretend to be endowed with special gifts and that they have the ability to help. And actually, it's all nonsense. So, faith, miraculous feats shouldn't be a reason for adopting faith. Miraculous feats, what appears to be miraculous, shouldn't be the basis that you decide. Don't ever embrace or accept a thing that makes no sense because you've seen something amazing happen. Because there are people who can manipulate facts and the truth and circumstances and are illusionists, or people who dabble in dark arts and black magic, and they have nothing good to give you, but they claim that they're on goodness and truth, and their evidence is, well, look what I can do. I can do some amazing, illusion or magic trick. So can David Copperfield. So can, any number of magicians, and that's not a reason to believe. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ warns us in a hadith about when the Antichrist, Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, comes to earth. The Prophet said, anyone who hears about him, don't go to see him. Guard yourself against him. In fact, he taught Surah Al-Kahf, the recitation of Surah Al-Kahf, for the purpose of protection against the Dajjal and his and becoming mesmerized by him. And the Prophet then told us there'll be some young men who will hear that the Dajjal is at hand, and they will say, well, we know for sure that we're completely rooted and grounded and firm in our faith, and that is a cockiness. To become overconfident is often the downfall. Pride comes before the fall, as they say, and the fact that you think you can do anything like this, and they'd say, well, no, we know for a fact, that we believe in Allah and His Messenger and Islam and the teachings of, but let's go and see the Antichrist just so we've seen him. And when they go to see him, their curiosity gets the better of them and they go to see him, they then fall under his influence and they become believers in him and they call him God and they support him. And so the Prophet warned us against things like this. So when you see a supernatural feat or what appears to be a supernatural feat, that isn't a reason to believe. And the Prophet refused. He didn't do that. Some prophets were given supernatural or miraculous feats. And amongst them was Jesus, Isa alayhi salam. And the Quran tells us about how but that came only after his call. His call, his life was the proof that he called people to. And then those who responded, he made dua and amazing things happened. And that's, as and when God wills, and it's only by the permission of God. This young man now had this gift of the acceptance of dua. And so people would flock to him with various complaints and ailments and conditions, and he would call them to renounce false gods and to worship God and embrace the one true God, and say, if you do that, I'll pray for you and Allah may grant you shifa. And they would, and he would, and they'd become better. A courtier of the king who was losing his eyesight one day went to this young man, and he went to him with lots of money and gifts and said, I'm going to, all of this is yours if you can restore for me my eyesight. And the young man says, and this is the truth of a person of God, he never claims. Allah says, ما كان لرجل in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about how anyone who has been blessed with الكتاب والحكم والنبوة ثم يقول للناس كونوا عبادا لي من دون الله ولكن كونوا ربانيين. Allah says in the Quran, never was a man granted revelation and ما كان لبشر this is in Surah Al-Imran, verse number 79. ما كان لبشر أن يؤتيه الله الكتاب والحكم والنبوة ثم يقول للناس كونوا عبادا لي من دون الله ولكن كونوا ربانيين بما كنتم تعلمون الكتاب وبما كنتم تدرسون. Allah says it was never befitting a person to whom God gives knowledge of scripture and to whom God gives authority, a religious authority and prophethood, that he should then go to the people and say to them, become servants of mine in place of God. Instead, they always said, become people of the Lord. Kunu rabbaniyin. They didn't call people to themselves. They called people to God Almighty. Become people of God. Bima kuntum tu'allimun al-kitab. For the truth of what you taught of the book. وَبِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَدْرُسُونَ. And the truth of all that you studied and learnt. So this young man, when the courtier comes to him and says, all of this, these presents, these gifts are yours, restore to me my eyesight. He says, I can't give anyone healing. I don't cure. I don't heal. It is Allah, it is God the Exalted who gives healing. So, Amin bih. So embrace faith, affirm faith in God. And then ask of him and he will grant you shifa. And so this is what happens. And the courtier then embraces faith and he becomes better. So, فَإِنْ آمَنْتَ بِاللَّهِ تَعَالَى دَعَوْتُ اللَّهَ فَشَفَاكَ. This is what he said. If you affirm faith in God, I will pray for you. And God will grant you shifa if he so chooses. And the courtier embraces faith and the young man prays and it's exactly what he said. And Allah restores his eyesight. When he then next goes and attends in the court of the king as the king's courtier, the king asks him about his eyesight and how he's able to see again. And who did that? And he says, well, this boy did. No, he doesn't say that. He says, Allah did. My Lord did. Rabbi. And the king says, you have a Lord other than I? And he says, yes, I do. And I've been taught about that. So the king tortures him until he tells the king about the young boy. The young boy is brought forward and he's tortured because he won't leave the belief in the one God, until he's also tortured. So he gives the name of the monk. The monk's tortured, and then the monk, but the monk will not renounce faith until the monk is cut in half and killed. Then the courtier, the king, turns to him and tells him to renounce faith. He also refuses to, so he's also killed. Then the young boy, and again he's killed in this very brutal way, he's sawn in half. Then the young boy is brought forward, and he's told, you've seen what's happened to the two people before you who refused to listen to the king, to obey the king, to reject faith. So will you spare your and save your own life by rejecting your faith? And the young boy refuses. So the king, I guess he's got a bit bored of sawing people in half. So he hands him over to a group of soldiers and tells them, اذهبوا به إلى جبل إلى جبل كذا وكذا فاصعدوا به الجبل فإذا بلغتم ذروته فإن رجع عن دينه وإلا فاطرحوه. So the king says, take him to the very peak of this mountain, and when you get right to the top, ask him one last time, will he abandon his new faith? And if he does, okay, but if not, then throw him from the top of the mountain. So they take him all the way to the top of the mountain. And when they get to the top of the mountain, the young boy makes dua and says, Oh Allah, ikfinihim bima shit. You take care of them for me. Be enough for me in taking care of them through whatever means you choose. The mountain trembles and shakes. There's like an earthquake. And all of the king's men tumble down from the mountain and fall to their deaths. And the young boy, he comes and he walks down and he comes straight back down to the king. And the king said, what happened to all of my soldiers? What happened to the people I sent with you? And the young boy says, Kafanihimullahu ta'ala. Allah the Exalted took care of them for me. Well, the king is an arrogant sod, and he decides, I'm going to have to try this again. And so he assembles more of his men and tells them to take him into the ocean. And once they've got to the ocean in a huge boat, to give him the chance one more time to leave his faith, and if he doesn't accept that, then to throw him into the sea. So the group take him and they take him to the ocean, and again he prays to Allah and he says the same thing, and a great wave comes crashing against the ship, and all of the king's men drown. And he comes walking back to the king, and again the king says, what happened? And he says, Allah took care of me, and Allah took care of them. And then he tells the king, listen, innaka lasta biqatili. There's not a chance that you're going to be able to kill me, except unless you do this one thing. And the king's all ears. He really wants to be rid of this thorn in his side, this young man who's become an annoyance and a nuisance, and his news of him is spreading throughout the land. The king really wants to be rid of him. So he says, what do I have to do to be able to kill you? So the young man says, تجمع الناس في صعيد واحد وتصلبني على جذع ثم خذ سهما من كنانتي ثم ضع السهم في كبد القوس ثم قل بسم الله رب الغلام ثم ارمني. He tells the king, you need to assemble all of the people into this great big open plain or great field, and then you need to tie me to a great tree, and then take an arrow out of my quiver and place it into the bow, and then say the words loudly and clearly, Bismillahi Rabbil Ghulam, in the name of Allah, the Lord of the young man, of this young man. And then let fly the arrow, and that's the only way you'll be able to kill me. Well, the king is so desperate to kill this young boy and be rid of him then he does that. He makes an announcement throughout the land, and all of the people have to assemble, and everyone comes to see. And by now everyone's heard about this boy who's impossible to kill. This boy who previously people had come to with ailments and physical complaints and ill health, and he'd invite them to faith and then pray for them, and then they'd become better. Now the king wants to kill him, and he's not able to kill him. He's twice attempted to have him killed, and both times they've failed. Everybody else has been killed except the boy, and he's not. He could have fled, but he's not fled. And now the king's finally going to deal with him once and for all by bringing everyone to witness his execution in this way. So they're all assembled, and everybody comes to the field. And the boy is tied to the trunk of a tree, and the king takes one of the arrows out of the boy's own quiver, places it in the bow, and then says, Bismillahi Rabbil Ghulam, in the name of God, Lord of this young boy. And then he lets fly the arrow, and the arrow it pierces fi sudghihi, which is like his face, his cheek. It hits his cheek, and the young boy reaches out and touches his face, and there's blood on his hands, and he takes his last breath and he dies. And then he says, and once he dies, all of the people, they see this. They see that this man was impossible to kill. And now that the king has invoked the God that he'd been calling to all alone, now has the king been able to kill him. But he's died. وَضَعَ يَدَهُ فِي صُدْغِهِ فَمَاتَ. He died with his hand on his cheek. He died with a smile on his face. And the people see this, and they suddenly say, آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ الْغُلَامِ. We too believe in the Lord of this young man. We affirm faith in the God that he worshipped. And the king is told this, and they see, and he is told, the very thing that you were afraid of has happened. For all of these people have now embraced the new faith. The king is beyond angry. And he can't see straight. So he instructs for a massive pit to be dug. And this huge pit is dug, and it's filled with timber, and they set light to it, and it becomes this big trench. And it's by the mouths of streets. And all of the people are told, and they're tied, and they're brought to the fire, and they're told, anyone who doesn't give up this new faith is thrown straight into the fire. But all of the people were willing to step into the fire rather than abandon the faith. And this is what happens when faith takes a hold. And Allah doesn't need you and me. And this is part of the point of this story, is if Allah wants to guide people, he can take previously perfectly heedless people and then plant the seed of faith so deeply in their heart that after that nothing will persuade them to abandon it. And there are people like that. And this community, an entire community becomes like that. Nothing can persuade them. And there's a raging fire that they're presented to. And they're told, are you going to abandon faith, or are you going to be flung into the fire? And they gladly step into the fire, every single one of them, except for a mother who's clasping her child with a child in her arms. Because when she's presented, she steps back. تَقَعَسَتْ أَنْ تَقَعَ فِيهَا. She takes a step back. But her child, God gives her child the ability to speak, and the child says, Ya ummah usbiri, fa innaki ala al-haq. O mother, be firm and patient, for you are upon truth. And then she proceeds like everybody else and steps into this. And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned this story as among the signs of what faith does. And this is a very beautiful story, because it reminds us of the way that people once they've fallen in love with God, then nothing else holds any attraction to them. You and I are constantly being tested by contradictory or opposing, competing love interests. There's everything that glitters and shines, and there's a certain group of friends, or there's popularity, or there's a certain career opportunity or prospects, or whatever it might be. And then there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting a good job and making a lot of money and having lots of friends, and that's fine. Except it's not the stuff that is the problem, it's loving it. And loving it more than you love God, that becomes a problem. Ramadan comes to try to wean us off the love of stuff. And that's why we're not allowed to eat stuff. Except, of course, by the end of the day, we're starving, and, that date and that water and the things you're going to eat. But then you find very quickly, you eat a little bit, and you can't eat anymore. You're full. You're done for. But Ramadan comes through the hardship and the struggle and the suffering and it's hardly suffering, but it is a struggle. Through all of that, to help us to achieve the love that really matters. And this is a love, it's like a virus once it takes hold, or it became viral in the community of the young boy. And in the Quran, Allah tells us, وَالسَّمَاءِ بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ وَشَاهِدٍ وَمَشْهُودٍ قُتِلَ أَصْحَابُ الْأُخْدُودِ. Allah swears by the sun, ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ, full of constellations, وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ, by the day that has been promised, and by the witness and the witnessed. قُتِلَ أَصْحَابُ الْأُخْدُودِ, all of the people of the trench were killed by this tyrannical ruler. قُتِلَ أَصْحَابُ الْأُخْدُودِ النَّارِ ذَاتِ الْوَقُودِ. Allah says it was a fire burning on that was kept alight using a great quantity of fuel. إِذْ هُمْ عَلَيْهَا قُعُودٌ, and all of the king's men sat around it. وَهُمْ عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ شُهُودٌ, and they were witnesses to what they did to the believers. And Allah says, وَمَا نَقَمُوا مِنْهُمْ إِلَّا أَن يُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ. And they had no other grievance against these people that they killed in this merciless way. And they had no other angst, no other complaint against them, except that they insisted on worshipping God, Al-Aziz Al-Hamid, the one who's full of praises. الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض, and to God belongs the kingdom of heaven and earth. Wallahu ala kulli shay'in shahid, and He is witness to all things. Brothers and sisters, we're stopping here. Assalamu alaikum.